Hey, Sox fans. Welcome to Good Guys Talk Back, a local fan-centric Chicago White Sox podcast, hosted by Nick Murawski and Pat Hester.
Yeah, hey, Sox fans. Welcome back to Good Guys Talk Back. Hey, it's episode 292. I am Nick Murawski, and this is a fan-centric Chicago White Sox podcast. Sox therapy here in the off season. We usually go every other week in the off season, but boy, we had some just humongous news drop this past week as the White Sox got a new manager and saying goodbye to another player that we thought was going to be a monumental, maybe a Rushmore type guy. I don't know, with the franchise. And that never amounted to much. So we'll get to that and a couple other things here on this November 3rd. If you're able to, join us live here on the Good Guys Talk Back YouTube channel. You can find the audio absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. Hey, with me, as always, my best friend, diehard Sox fan, Pat Hester. Hello, sir.
And Nick, little did you know, diehard sax fan. I mean, that came out this past week. That I didn't even know that I played the saxophone, but it was put out there on social media. Yeah. I am a huge saxophone player, so yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah. Greg Miller was having I think just the text part of the podcast read to him. And I don't know if it was in my accent or what, but it came out as, I think it was diehard sax fan, Pat Hester.
You know me.
Big fan of the sax.
I love Bill Clinton playing the saxophone.
Sure. Yeah.
It's Soothing, Elisa Simpson, Bleeding Gums, Murphy, all the best saxophone players that I can name.
Yeah, those are, I think, the only ones.
Bill Clinton and two Simpsons characters. After that, there's not a long list of saxophone players, but those are the best of the best.
Yeah. Hello, John, Sydney, Sean. Good to have you along. We were thinking about doing an emergency podcast on the day of the hiring of Will Venable, but I think we were maybe 2 or 3 days off, maybe 4 at the most. Figured might as well just wait till Sunday night, but. This past week, the Sox announced their 44th manager in franchise history, Will Venable. I've heard it Venable. We'll probably get a pronunciation, and then after he's been with the team for like 3 years, someone will say, it's really pronounced Venable. You guys are all wrong. So we'll, pronounce it how you want, but he is the new manager, Pat. Your immediate thoughts and reactions when you heard the news?
Well, my first thought was, who is this guy, right? Because there had been a couple names that were linked to the White Sox that you had heard of, that you were familiar with, and then a Will Venable. Mm-hmm. But after hearing a little bit about him and hearing him on the air and talk about, why he took this job and all that kind of stuff, I'm more encouraged with the good stink that he has on him in terms of the people that he's been around. Bruce Bochy, Theo Epstein, Joe Madden, Alex Cora, people that have been in the game, have won, that he's been close to. So if you're going to look for positive with a Will Venable, I can't tell you if Will is going to do anything good for this team. And really, can you judge him after the first 2 years off of wins and losses? No, I don't think that's fair for him, because this team's going to be awful until they decide to, build and put around a team around him that's going to be productive. So I'm excited for, a different voice, something to be, someone to be heard from that's different than what we've gotten used to. If there's multiple losses again, I'm sure the voice will get tiresome, and we'll find a way to get his quote of the week in and poke fun at him on a weekly basis. I'm sure of that. But for now, it seems fine. But really, is there anything to get excited about? Because this isn't a managerial hire that you're looking to push you over the edge, right? There's a reason why we did a Tony La Russa emergency
Mm-hmm.
podcast. It was because that team, not just because it was Tony, and regardless of what he did as a White Sox manager in his most recent stint, he is a Hall of Fame baseball manager who won 3 world championships, who was supposed to take a really good team and put this team over the top and take us to, another championship. That didn't happen. But, there's a reason why you don't do emergency podcasts for, a manager that's taking over for another manager that had the most losses in American League history or in baseball history. It's because, are you really supposed to be excited about it? You tweeted, you texted me. If he wins them another 20 games, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. I guess it's about, let's just remove ourselves from the wins and losses and say, what kind of a foundation and culture can he build? And we'll assess his success based on that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a waiting game, right? It's the
Mhm.
ultimate we'll see. And I hate to have this apathetic feeling, but I didn't have a lot of highs or lows, man. I was middle of the road when this was announced, and you heard about it rumored, and you knew his name was on the list, and I wasn't really sure who the guy was. And when he was originally tossed around, I heard from the host of Locked On Rangers, who does an outstanding job, and he said, "There's no way. There's no way that Will Venable is going to leave the Rangers when Bruce Bochy has maybe like a year left. He's going to want to take over that gig." And I thought that made a lot of sense. We've heard that in other situations over the years when a bench coach, is primed, ready to go. And what's interesting about the Venable thing is he was been coveted. Like, he turned jobs down over the years, which I don't think Pedro Grifol turned a lot of jobs down. I don't think he turned any jobs down. I think he was told no by teams, namely the Kansas City Royals that he was with.
Stop knocking on the door, Pedro. Nobody's home.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, to your point with the Tony La Russa, I think even back Rick Renteria, because of what was happening with that team at that point. That was the great teardown. That was the exciting prospects coming in. Here's a guy that had managed before and had been with the organization as a bench coach. And again, I've told the story, but when I heard Ricky Renteria speak at Sox Fest in January of 2017, I wanted to run through a wall from that guy.
You were enchanted.
I was enchanted. I ended up getting, season tickets. I liked the direction of this team. I absolutely love what I heard from Ricky Renteria. This was a project in the making, and I thought he was the right guy to get these players ready to play. And then, of course, they get to the playoffs in 2020. They still have a very competitive, very playoff ready team. And, who's going to be the next guy and the drama and everything around La Russa. And then after La Russa, they still had a core. They still had a team when Pedro Grifol was hired. So that was kind of a big deal because they went outside of the White Sox organization and they still had the makings to make a run at a winnable AL Central, right? We were reminded of that. This time around, I don't know. I just didn't feel much excitement. I don't know if I was maybe underreacting, but I definitely saw a lot of insane overreactions. Again, I don't want to, I don't want to degrade anybody's fandom. I don't, but wow. I looked at some reactions as, I don't know if I can be there with you at that level of reaction. I mean, this was historically the worst. They're not going to spend any money this offseason. They're most likely going to get rid of the major asset that they have in Garrett Crochet and probably try to get rid of, you could argue, the biggest fan draw in Luis Robert Jr. I don't know what to make of their farm system. It's better, but are they just trying to breed guys that they can flip? Are these guys actually going to see a White Sox uniform. It's this cycle that you got to get out of at some point. You have to start holding on to your players and building around them, and giving them contracts and spending the money to pad that. So at the end of the day, with all of that, it's like, okay, this guy, when Will Venable was on the list, he was on Chris Getz's list, and this is a guy that Chris Getz wanted. So whether he's going to be successful or not, it seems like Chris Getz was able to convince this guy that in your first managerial stint, it should be with the Chicago White Sox.
Well, you've already changed the pronunciation of his name. You just went Venable. So this is what Chicagoans do.
Right.
We traditionally say people's names incorrectly, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's very on brand for you.
Thank you.
I love it. I 100% understand that. And I can understand why you'd say, why would you get so excited? People went a little bit over the top. I get that, but I'm also encouraged by the fact that it seems like it was a very solid hire. I'm encouraged by the fact that there was seemingly several people looked at and interviewed, and
60 candidates apparently.
There was a lot of work done. Was it quality work? I have no idea. I don't know how the process went, but there was work done. I mean,
that's
again,
key.
we've been through a process where there was zero work done, and there was just, there was a GM and a manager hired with zero work done. It was just, this is what's happening. So I'm encouraged by that. I heard him speak on the air this week to Cap and Adam Abdallah on the morning show, and he sounded like a very affable guy. He sounded good in an interview, but what does that do for you? I don't know. But he didn't give off a lot of like corny Pedro speak, right? Because was
he trying too hard? I thought Pedro was really trying way too hard to tell us exactly what we wanted to hear.
No, it just seemed like, I'm a baseball guy. I'm talking to you. It's going to be very casual. We got a lot of work to do. But it wasn't like these are the things I believe in, and we're going to do this, and here's the pillars for success, and we're going to blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. It was a very casual conversation, and it was a very, like, why would you take this? And he's excited, seemingly, from the conversation he had. He was excited more about establishing his culture and building towards something. Now, maybe that's all lying, and he's just, taking one of 32 jobs, and this is a great opportunity because of that. I don't know, but he seemingly was excited about, I'm going to establish myself here. I'm going to build what I want to build and do it from the ground up. And that seemed like it was something that was exciting to him. It wouldn't be exciting for me to have to build that from knowing what you know about this organization and being privy to the information we've been given this past year with how things are done at 35th and Shields. But I enjoyed the conversation. I'm not going to sit here and go, whoa, I was blown away and I can't believe it, and I'm going to go out and buy season tickets because of the conversation. No, that's not the case. But I will say that it was encouraging to hear him. I liked what I heard. And it didn't sound like over the top rah-rah type of, everyday jargon type of conversation that you would get from a first-time manager. So, I guess it's a wait and see type of thing. But if he has influence on how the front office is run and how things are done in terms of decision-making because of his time with Theo Epstein, that to me is a little bit more encouraging than anything else. I think he's got a lot of great experience, not only in the dugout, but in the front office, which I think can lend really well to some success. But we'll see. The book will be written on a Will Venable, and hopefully he makes it a long time and is a successful manager. That's what we all hope, right? We don't want to root against the guy before he starts, but I get why people would be like a little bit reserved in terms of getting excited about it.
Yeah, I absolutely, I personally have to be reserved. I'm hoping for the best. I hope he does have positive influences in the front office, and he can, get people to listen to him of this is how things are done in successful organizations. I encourage you to get out of your comfort zone and try that in terms of bolstering maybe an analytic department or scouting, or, take a look at some other in terms of just players. Hey, these are some guys that I think we could maybe spend money on. That's the money that we will spend on. These can be guys not just to flip, but that could be important for our organization. Do you think it's a great situation for Venable that he's got zero expectations in his first time as a manager? This is great for him because, hey, if they fail, they're supposed to fail. Is that the right mentality, you think?
That's a great question because I think if you've ever managed people before, whether it's, in Major League Baseball or any walk of life, right? You have to measure your people somehow. And I get it. Every situation is a case by case situation, but I think it's a benefit to him not to be measured by wins and losses this year, and more about how what is a reflection of your players upon you. Like, there was a lot of positive momentum, whether we like it or not, for Grady Sizemore because of the positive feedback that he got from his players. So I think that's like number one. Like, can you get a group of guys playing hard for you and not quitting on you? I think that's how you measure him. There's only one way to kind of understand that as a fan base is what we kind of hear back from the clubhouse, if we can get that kind of information, because it's not going to result in wins and losses. It certainly didn't for Grady Sizemore. So I think it's a benefit to him to not have that weight of wins and losses on his shoulders this year. But how long does it go before you actually start to look at wins and losses and you say, all right, now that the training wheels are off, we're going to start looking at how you perform, how your team performs, and that's how you'll be judged. It's a really weird thing, and I don't know what his contract is like. I would imagine it's a multi-year contract situation where it's at least 3 years. So,
which isn't enough to get this thing turned around.
So I think the judgment on wins and losses probably comes in the second half of year two. Yeah, but who knows? Again, to me, it's about building some type of culture, and things will start to come out about how the players really feel about a manager one way or another.
I think he's going to receive immediate respect because he played the game. It sounded like that was an issue with Pedro Grifol. Players weren't really happy with some of the things that he was saying, or didn't get behind him, didn't respect his different philosophies because he didn't play. And that also goes for Rick Hahn. Rick Hahn never played the game, and I think there was a lack of respect there. I think players do respect Chris Getz because he played. I know Jerry.
That's fair? Let me ask you this. I don't mean to derail you, but do you think that's fair for players to judge their management, whether they played the game or not?
I think it is probably not fair, but I understand why. Mm-hmm. You either are coming in with a resume with a track record of, like, I'm Dave Dombrowski. I don't know if that guy played or not. I'm assuming he didn't play, but it's like, I've done some things. Okay, so you might want to listen to what I've got to say. I don't know if Theo Epstein ever made it to the major leagues or played, or I'm not sure, but he's got a resume. He's done some things. So I think when you've got a guy like Rick Hahn that, all he really did was see the biggest assets that we had and was able to just flip them. It's like, okay, I got rid of and I just tried to get the best that I could from another team's farm system, and that didn't really go anywhere. When I feel like the rubber hit the road, I wasn't impressed with the decisions that were being made. Now Chris Getz, I feel like he's, again, deck is stacked against him. Should never have been hired, but was put in the situation where he's got to change absolutely everything. He's got to change the players. He's got to change the culture. He's got to change fan perception. All of this stuff as a first-time general manager. I guess the one thing he's got going for him is like, hey guys, I played. Like, I know where you're at in the struggle here, and they might, if anything, respect him for that.
I guess that's fair. It's just curious because especially in the media, there's plenty of media people that have never played any sport whatsoever, and there's plenty that are in media that have played. And it's the old adage of, can you really comment on something if you didn't play the game, right? And I think it's an interesting thing when you have people in positions of power in sports where they've never played before, and how their players respond or don't respond to them. So I think, I don't think it's a prerequisite, but I think it's a helpful thing that you've played the game and you're also successful in terms of how you've transitioned into the front office or a field manager. So
well, I think it's good to have the balance.
Yeah.
I think if you're just coming from that former player perspective and you're so tied into that, you haven't taken a few steps back and see what it's like from outside, and the other ways possible as well. And in terms of, being on sports radio or doing something like you and I do, I like it from the fan perspective part. Obviously we didn't play the game, and so many personalities that you hear on the Score or 1000 or wherever you listen to your sports radio or stream it or whatever podcast. I like it from, you're coming from outside the player's perspective and watching it from a fan's world, and seeing it as a fan, you get to separate yourself from seeing it as a player. And I like the balance. I like to hear, what former players say. And, but I think sometimes former players are just like, you don't understand. You'll never understand because you didn't play the game. Like, I'm thinking at such a higher level, and they can't articulate it to fans. And then that's a problem where I think the fan perspective is like, well, we watch the game, we consume it, we see it all. We're not necessarily objective, but in a weird way we are, because we're not wrapped up in making all the decisions or in there in every moment. Like, we get to see it in a macro level.
Yeah, but I think it'll serve Will well for the future in terms of him having some experience. So I'm excited for that, because anything to be a positive with your players, I think, will be helpful.
Yeah.
And if that's what this, I don't know what core is left, but whatever the core you want to call this of players on this team, if they can get behind him and support him, I mean, it's the faster it'll get better, right? Because if it continues to rot, you've called it a rot for a long time. The further away from success we'll ever be. So I didn't mean to derail the conversation there, Nick, but I just think it's always interesting when you've got, players looking at non-players and making a judgment whether they can be successful or not.
I think that's the nature of the beast. And I think that was apparent with Pedro Grifol. Good players are going to make great managers, or great players make great managers, however you want to say it. And there are few there. I mean, do you want to put Garrett Crochet in the great category? I don't think I'm ready to do that. I don't even think I can put Luis Robert Jr. there. We've got some good players who will be around in 2025 when they head to Arizona. Nobody knows. And that might, we really might not know that till, comes Valentine's Day and pitchers and catchers have to report. I mean, it's probably going to be another slow, hot stove around all of Major League Baseball, and kind of a non-existent one for the Sox. I mean, there'll be little deals here and there. They'll probably maybe find some arms that they can flip. You're going to need arms in general just to pitch and fill out your bullpen and beyond. But position player wise, I don't know. It's going to be looking at guys, that hey, it's kind of your time here. You're part of the future for the Sox. And so I don't look at wins and losses with Venable at all in 2025. Again, someone said to me on social media a couple days ago, they said, hey, think about it. Like, if this guy, if you can get him to 80 wins, I mean, just think about that. I'm like, 80 wins. 80 wins, you build a statue for him. 80 wins, you give him a lifetime contract. I mean, that's absolutely insane. But the weird thing is again, even if you win 20, 25 more games, you're close to losing 100 games. That's how crazy, that's how bad this team was in 2024. So it's not about wins and losses. It's really how I looked at that 2017 to kind of bring it all back. I didn't look too much at wins and losses. I looked how the players played, what they were saying, what Renteria was saying, if he was being able to get his message. And you saw growth. You saw growth from the certain players that you wanted to see. And I think that'll be from 2025. So
who was saying 80 wins, by the way? Are you willing to out this person?
I don't even remember. Okay. I come in contact with so many people and I think they were just maybe being hopeful, but 80 wins. 80 wins is substantial.
Wow. That would be, I mean, if 80 wins.
That's an emergency podcast.
That is an emergency podcast. When they get 80 wins, it might be over the next, if we count all of last year plus this year, we might get to 80 wins.
Yeah. So I wish, Venable well. I'm looking forward to hearing more of him. I think Sydney said it in the chat. I think we're all wondering what kind of staff will he have? What kind of bench coach? What other? There was Getz alluded to some old faces returning. I hope it's not somebody like Daryl Boston, for God's sake.
The bane of Nick Murawski's existence is Daryl Boston.
I mean, talk about somebody that hung around for a decade too long. He just survived. He just survived, and thankfully he was finally gone. I don't know who. Grady Sizemore is the obvious one. It sounds like there were some people that were surprised that Grady Sizemore was not actually hired. It sure felt like that when you heard guys just bowing out, or they were not involved. They were excusing themselves from the managerial race for a variety of different reasons. I think we could all figure out why some of those reasons were. Probably the contract that was being offered and the type of job it was going to be, which again, I'm really surprised for a guy that has turned down other positions and seems to have a pretty bright baseball mind up on his shoulders and maybe a bright future. Do you think, Pat, that, if he just can't, if it doesn't work out and 2-3 years go by, I know this is long way down the line, but it's like, man, you never really turned it around with this Sox team. And of course, we can point to a lot of things of why that could be. Does that ruin it then for his future? I mean, you got to think about that. You got to think about yourself, like, I want to have a job. I want to be in the business, and I don't want this stink on me if I can't figure it out.
I think that Pedro's got the stink on him that he'll never manage another team ever again. But I think it's because you can draw a direct line to the lack of success on this team to him, right? So I think all the damage has already been done. Whatever Will Venable does from this point forward in theory, should only go up. It should only improve from here. Now, it doesn't mean that he's going to improve to 80 wins like some people are thinking, or hoping for, but it should improve. So I think it's one of those things where this is just the first bite of the apple for him. And if he's here for 3 to 4 years and he goes off and he has some success to talk about during his tenure with the White Sox, I mean, I think that's only a plus for him. If he could go to another team and go and say, listen, I took a 40-win team and I got them to 60 to 65 to 75 wins over my time there. I mean, that's to me, and to anybody else, if he's selling himself, you go, that's what I was able to do with the little talent that I was given. So I don't think there's no way he can go down unless he completely, lost the clubhouse. There was some type of scandal of some sort, or some type of catastrophe in terms of how the team was managed on a day in and day out basis. So I don't think this is a ruiner for him. I think the person that kind of ruined his opportunity for a second, managerial job was Pedro, and it's because he just did things that didn't make any sense, regardless of the talent on the field. So I don't think Will has anything to lose in this situation.
We'll find out. Again, the greatest we'll see, in recent memory for me. I've been burned in a lot of different ways, as we all have, of Sox fans, of prospects, and also, the next great thing in terms of manager. It's outside the organization, saying all the right things. It's a guy that gets zeroed in on and has been in some successful situations, but he's never managed, and he's got a task in front of him. The team will look very different than it did when Ricky started in 2017, then Tony took over, then Pedro, then even last year, as a lot of these players that were around the last playoff run in 2021 are gone. And we'll probably finish that off in the offseason. But the latest is Yoan Moncada, and the Chicago White Sox, no surprise here, decide to not offer that money, not continue that relationship. And it's really goodbye for Yoan Moncada. It was a run. It was an era that I think, sadly, we'll all just think of the injuries and the missed opportunities and the wincing and the coming off the field and all that stuff. But he had moments. He absolutely had moments. Not as many at all as we wanted. But it's just a shame because the hope, between him and Kopech, and we just saw Kopech win a World Series with the Dodgers. It was Moncada and Kopech that started this whole thing in December of 2016, and we wanted so much, not just from them, but they were the beginning, and things were supposed to be built around them, but we didn't even get it from them. A lot of injuries and a lot of just never living up to it. The organization didn't help them out, namely Kopech, but Moncada, for a lot of different reasons, sometimes it just felt like he was not there mentally. He wanted to do other things, was getting kind of billed as like made of glass. But man, when he could turn it on sometimes, it was just like, wow, we're seeing it. If you could just put this together for a full season, for a couple seasons, not only offense but defense. I thought he was one hell of a third baseman when he was right, and could have won a Gold Glove, and maybe he catches on with another team. But I don't think we'll forget this era of players anytime soon, Pat. I really think we're going to be talking about this kind of stuff for a long, long time as Sox fans when you bring up these names. And your thoughts on Yoan Moncada off to probably a new start somewhere.
There have been many, many players that you and I have watched that have, come through the door and then exit, and then you don't think much about them for several years, and you go, "Oh, remember that guy? And he did this one time, and I remember I liked him because of this." Maybe they didn't have the biggest impact in the world, but you just kind of either liked them or didn't like them, but you remember them, right? I don't think there's anything Yoan Moncada has ever done that you can say, "Well, I like him because of this." Unfortunately for him, you're going to remember him for all the negative that there was, and it wasn't negative that. I guess there was some like weird stories that came out about him, They weren't all rosy, but for the most part, it's going to be the negative in terms of the injuries and the negative in terms of the perception that he didn't want to really be out there to play. That's what I think all of us got. And I think, if you're a Yoan Moncada apologist, you're going to say he was conserving his body because he was always broken down. So he's not going to run hard at first, or he's going to look a little bit more lackadaisical defensively because he's just worried about getting hurt and he wants to be more available. And that's fine. But I think the story will be ultimately written. Yoan Moncada, top 5 prospect in baseball, I think, when we got him, and was unable to even come to his floor. Right? They always talk about what's the player's ceiling and what's his floor, and his floor is like, wow, that's great. If he was just that as a minimum, like whatever that greatness was, that'd be a fantastic player we could have. He never even reached the floor. He didn't even reach the basement of his potential. Because he just wasn't available. And the optics of what he was, and we crushed Jay Cutler in this town for years for body language. The body language, the seemingly not willing to have any
emotion,
effort or emotion. I mean, that just killed him, right? That killed him in this town. You're not going to make it really far as an athlete in this town if you're not willing to at least show that you care about being here. So it's unfortunate because, again, I'll go back to all the times that we've talked about predicting the season and who's going to be the team MVP. And for at least 2 consecutive years, I would pick Yoan Moncada because I thought he was the best all-around player that we had. And some would argue it's Robert, because of what he can do both offensively and defensively and steal bases and all that. But I just thought what Moncada could provide from the left side of the plate in terms of his power, what he could do from a third base perspective, he may not be the leader of this team, but he was going to be the heart and soul in terms of the player of this team. And he didn't come anywhere close. Good thing he wasn't the heart and soul, because it would have been a dead person laying on the ground half the time. So that's my thoughts on Yoan. And I don't like to just kick a guy on their way out and bash them, because obviously he's had a litany of health concerns and problems. And some of it, I don't know that you can 100% control. I guess you could argue the off-season routines and all that stuff that Jerry had mentioned that we need to hold guys more accountable to, but I don't know. The guys seem to be, wound tighter than a piano, and every
sometimes your body just can't do it, Pat. I mean,
it was just like, bow, and just everything's popping all the time. So I don't know. I would have loved to see him reach his potential in a White Sox uniform. I don't know if he'll ever reach any kind of potential.
Yeah, I mean, you got Eloy Jimenez looking for a new job, and there'll be others. But Moncada, Howard mentioned it in the chat. That first game, that first at bat, I was there for that first game of his, and he got a standing ovation for taking a walk because of his patience at the plate. And I think 2019 he might have had a pretty favorable season. A season that we really thought, okay, he's going to build on this. I will remember him for, I think he had a couple 5-hit games, namely one in Detroit. He had a couple games against Houston, maybe in 2022. Someone's going to have to check me on that. It was at home against Houston, games that we really needed. And he showed up big and clutch in 2 straight games. And to see, he did give you some emotion when he got to first base and he came up with clutch hits late in the game. It was like, wow, this is the guy we wanted to count on. It was just small glimpses, but absolutely, to your point, not at all what we wanted. And I think we would pick him, especially you, I would imagine, because sometimes you do that with your heart, because you want to see these guys succeed. And you're envisioning a season where what if Moncada hit 30 plus home runs and 100 RBIs and he played in 150 games and he was in the Gold Glove conversation and he was just a man on a mission, a feared hitter from both sides of the plate. Wow, that he could be that. So let's will it to happen. Let's pick him as our team MVP going into a season when we make predictions. And it just was never there. And it's just so unfortunate because of what he and Kopech and a bunch of others symbolized, for the Chicago White Sox moving forward.
Do you think with him, it did come down to a matter of whether he wanted it or not? I mean, it just seemed like baseball wasn't all that important to him. And I'm sure, I'd like to think, I'm not going to say I'm sure, but I'd like to think that if he was sitting next to me, he'd smack me and say, you don't understand the hours I put in to make this game a living and why I do this because I love it and all that stuff. But
yeah,
it seemed to me like it came down to wanting to be there or not wanting to be there. And now he'll have a lot of time on his hands to figure out that he didn't want to be there.
Yeah, I feel like those are great points, and I've thought about that quite a bit. In the fan perspective world of not just him but other players on this White Sox team that have gone and a couple still around. I know Guillen has talked about that, and just that's just because he doesn't show emotion. It doesn't mean he doesn't care type of thing. I come from it. I'm going to try to talk this out. He might have been so good in his collection of players where he was playing that he was like big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
And he was always the greatest, and he was told he was the greatest, and he was just hyped up, and he believed in that hype. And he never really had to, I don't want to say that, I don't want to come off like he didn't work hard, but like he was clearly gifted and clearly talented and stood out to be the number one prospect in all of baseball. And for ESPN to give him the attention that they did way back when in the articles. And so he had that. And it's not like he was a diamond in the rough that had to fight and claw and get attention as like some late round pick. And then he's given all of this money very early in a career without really proving much. And I wonder if that, when it wasn't happening and he was getting hurt and just the success and the results weren't happening, if he just kind of said, you know what, I got paid, man. Like, it is what it is. If I can produce, and that's great, but I've done what I wanted to do. I don't know. That's probably not the right way to think of it. Again, it's tough to put myself in that. But
it's human nature, Nick. I mean, honestly,
it is.
I think it's a hard thing to fight when I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think you and I are, ever going to be handed a $24 million contract anytime in our lives, right? It's hard to say what you and I might, or how we might react to things. But I think it's just human nature to go, they've just paid me to really for zero performance. And you'd like to think that someone's going to have the character and the intestinal fortitude to want to get up and still do it every day without that carrot in front of them. But I would argue to say that, listen, most people are going to be, you've paid me. It's a contract. You can't change the contract. It is what it is. These things are pretty solid in Major League Baseball. So why am I gonna put my body through the hell it needs to go through in the off season to go ahead and play throughout the regular season? And who knows if it'll ever amount to anything in terms of this team having any kind of success. I think I'll just I'm going to enjoy my time off, and I'll come back and I'll get myself into shape in spring training like people used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my talent will overcome anything I may have missed in the offseason. And I think that's what a lot of players like Yoan Moncada have done. It's like, listen, I know I'm talented. Everybody's told me I'm talented. And then it goes to your point of of what you were trying to say. I think it's like at some point I'm so good, I don't have to work hard anymore. And I don't think it ever got through to him that, man, I really do. I actually have to work even harder than I ever worked in my life to make it work for me here. And I don't think he got that memo. And I don't know if he'll ever play anywhere again. I don't know if anybody's going to be willing to give him an opportunity to play at the big league level. But I would hope for him, because it's not like I want to root against him, but I would hope for him that he would say, I've taken all that in, and now I know that I have to work even harder to have success here, and it's not going to just rest on my past accomplishments.
Yeah, I especially when the franchise is kind of on your shoulders.
Yeah.
No one knows what that's going to feel like, and you're touted as the number one prospect. I think there might be some excitement of going from Boston to the White Sox as I'm going to get opportunity, and they are entrusting me to really turn things around. There's that honeymoon phase, that there's a euphoria of everybody likes to be coveted. Everybody wants to be sought after. And he was definitely sought after, and it was in a big deal, a big splashy deal. But you don't know what that feels like when the weight of a city, a fandom, an organization is on your shoulders, and we're starving for some success out of you. It's hinging on you, and it's just not developing. It's just not happening. And then the injuries and it's the balance. It's the weird like game you have to play as an organization of, we want to look like we're investing in our players, right? And retaining our talent and getting ahead, which is the Sox love to do that, right? They love to front load that stuff. Give these guys big money right now because they don't want to pay the piper, when those early contracts are up, because they know that if these guys hit it, we're not going to be able to afford what they're going to want when they go to market. So that's a tough one. And I feel like the Sox really, it burned them a couple times with giving big money to players, as we started this rebuild back in 2017, 2018, and we just didn't get anything from it.
I still would like to think the way they were doing it was very smart, right? Because you're avoiding exactly what you talked about. You're avoiding going into those free agency contract negotiations that can get kind of ugly, and players ready to move on, and maybe another fan base being held hostage by a decision that might or may not be made. And I get why you'd want to avoid all that stuff, but I don't know. I'd like to think, because of the situation the Sox are in, they still entertain those types of things and make bets on players. But I think you really have to do a little bit more due diligence when it comes to these guys and really find out more about the man, rather than just say black and white on paper, this makes sense because of our financials going forward. I think it's got to make sense on their financials going forward, and go, you never know how somebody's going to react, but based on his history and based on what kind of a person he is, and based on the 50 people we've interviewed that know him best, I'm comfortable giving him money now because I know that he's still going to work hard, in the off season and several off seasons to get better. So I think it's still a interesting, I don't know if it's right or wrong, way about going about business, but I can't really fault Rick for the contracts he gave out, because at the time I applauded him for them, if that makes sense.
Well, that was me as a fan, excited to have this collection of players around for a long time. That it seemed to be purposeful to keep this core around. They knew what they had. And in hindsight, it was, wow, we had players that felt like just took the money and ran, or didn't, or got injured when they did run. So yeah, let's talk about another guy that may or may not be here for the Will Venable era. And hello to Scott and Joe and Trey. Welcome. Better late than never. Really appreciate all of you being with us here on Sunday night. Andrew Vaughn. Everybody's talked about Andrew Vaughn. I feel like this is the off season of Andrew Vaughn. Will they? Won't they? In terms of, giving him the monies when the time is there. So he just completed his 4th full season with the White Sox, and here are his games played in those 4 seasons: 127, 134, 152, 149. 21 home runs is his high mark in a season. 80 RBIs is his high mark. Best slash line, 271, 321, 419, 750, his best OPS. Played full-time first base in 2023, 2024, a 995 and a 996 fielding percentage in those years at first base. Projected $6 million in 2025. So ultimately, do you pass on Andrew Vaughn? Are we done with Andrew Vaughn? Or do you still think, Pat, as a fan, in your mind, we have to continue to hold on to Andrew Vaughn? There's something there that we need to see the end of here.
I think it's interesting just because there's a managerial change, Nick. I mean, if things were the same and Pedro was back again this year after the year we've had, I'd say I'd seen enough of Andrew Vaughn. There's enough out there. There's been you look kind of like a sample size of 3 years, and you feel like that's kind of a good chunk to go off of. This is who this guy is, right? But I'd like to see how it looks under a Will Venable. Again, I don't know if he's going to be a good manager, a bad manager, an average manager. I don't know. But if he's a better than average manager, I'd like to see Andrew. And again, this is a lot dependent too upon who he brings in on his staff. But I'd like to see Andrew Vaughn, the potential that we've heard about. I don't know that it'll ever be realized because that seems almost too far-fetched at this point. But I'd like to see if he can get to, really good player, right? I don't need him to be our all-star level or, Golden Glove type first baseman. I just want to say, boy, we're pretty solid at first base. We don't have to think about the first base for the next 5 or 6 years, right? That's how I kind of view Andrew Vaughn is, well, we don't have to worry about that position for a long, long time. Let's talk about Andrew Vaughn in several years from now. So I don't know. I'm not ready to give up on Vaughn. I don't know. What say you?
I'm okay if they gave up on him. I'm not going to lose any sleep. I really thought a couple years ago he was going to break out. I just, again, like how we talked about, not necessarily gambling, but speaking with your heart instead of your head and trying to will it to happen. Here was like almost a can't miss guy coming out of college, Golden Spikes winner. This guy mashed the ball. It just felt like, wow, we're going to have a slugger. And I don't know if I buy into the whole, well, he's not tall enough, he's too short type of thing. I don't mind his defense at first. It's really been his offense that I don't get I don't get it. I just don't get if he just hasn't been able to figure something out. He doesn't have the right coaches. If there has been a lot of nagging injuries that have not been reported. I know there was a back thing for a while there, but some of the numbers, here, and maybe it's, only 2 years at first base. Do we need another year at first base? Did he need consistent playing time in the field? I feel like I'm making more excuses for Andrew Vaughn than necessary. So if they say as an organization, or if Will Venable says, look, my staff and I, I don't think this is the right fit. I kind of like where we are in different situations, or what the plan is maybe for first base, which there are some plans there. I think we could move away from Andrew Vaughn. I'd be okay with it. I really would.
Well, that's your opinion. I'm not going to say anything bad about it because I could totally see your point. But and I can't remove myself from it, Nick, because this is just how I feel. But I do feel like that. I just want to will it to happen, right? I want to will him to be a decent baseball player, and I just wonder also too. And there's really no defense for the offensive season that he had this past year. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try and defend it and give you any kind of stats to try and promote him as a better offensive player than he's shown to this point. But I think I just want it to work so badly because of this is our guy, this was our pick, this was, somebody that other organizations pined for, and the Chicago White Sox got him, and they got their man, and that's fantastic. But at some point, you have to develop people, and you have to put them in positions to win. And obviously, this organization failed him in that aspect. But I have a hard time separating myself from what I want him to be and what he really is. And maybe that's not fair. And I also don't know if it's fair do we judge him also based on the position he plays and for the organization he plays in, right? This is a team that's had a pretty long and healthy run of solid first baseman. Now you can't say that about second baseman or right field because we don't pay attention to those positions. Those don't exist.
Spots.
We'll just put question marks there for the next several years. But first base has been a position where we've had Hall of Fame level and Hall of Very Good level played for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I there's something about this whole new era now that maybe it's best to get rid of as many players from the past as possible and just say, you know what, why hang on and why have that mentality? I get what you're saying. Trust me, I was a big Andrew Vaughn fan for a long time. I thought that this was going to be it. This was going to be his year. I wanted it. I wanted it so bad because I knew the potential that was there coming into the organization and what we needed and that long line of first baseman that you mentioned, and how cool would have been for him to finally now get his shot at first base full time. And it just clicked for him. And that would have been a nice thing to discuss and watch unfold. But I'm ready for them to just kind of clean house if they can. And honestly, if you find somebody for Luis Robert Jr., I know we'll talk more about this in the offseason. I don't know what you're really going to find for him. I don't think you're going to find what people think he's worth, because I don't think he's worth what people think he's worth.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get the farm at all for Luis Robert Jr. It's really Garrett Crochet that's your biggie.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to be spending money in his organization, and I hate to say it because I love to build around pitching, and I really wish they would invest in Garrett Crochet, then yeah, I think he's going to have to be moved too. So you can somehow fast track some things in their mind.
Yeah. And I totally get that. But I don't think you're not selling right now on a high. I think you're better off waiting till the trade deadline with both of them, unless you get some type of offer that you think is, worthy of moving guys before the off or before the season.
We'll see what the market's like. If things aren't moving and people are asking way too much, and we'll see what other teams have to dangle. To other teams that are looking to flesh out their roster and think they're an ace away from really making a run. We'll see how it plays out. I do have a quote of the week, but want to thank everybody for being with us here on Sunday night, chopping up some White Sox stuff. White Sox therapy really is the Sox announced their 44th manager in franchise history, Will Venable. We'll see what kind of coaching staff he brings in. I hope he has a major say, and I'll be intrigued to see if any former names, faces come back and really how they start moving things in a direction that it needs to be forward. It absolutely needs to be forward. I'm also waiting to hear some more about Sox Fest. I haven't really heard any chatter at all. And now you got a new manager, And, you could really try to move away from this past season. We will not let the organization forget about it, but coupling the 20th anniversary of the 05 team with a new direction, okay, a new hope, you've got something to sell at Sox Fest. If they could just figure out how to do that. And I haven't heard anything, hopefully soon.
Well, A New Hope, that's Star Wars Episode 4 situation right there, Nick. So, you got that going for you, which is nice. And I have not heard anything about Sox Fest. So
we're going, though, by the way. You and I are going,
oh, yeah.
And we will be there if it happens.
Reporting live. I think we just bring a table, bring the mics, bring the laptops, and we'll just do a live broadcast, whether they want us there or not. We'll just, start recording.
I love it. Just some, kind of guerrilla podcasting. We'll just set up in an alley. We'll figure out the power source. We'll just set up in an alley.
Isn't it going to be in February? Can we get inside? Is it possible?
You at least get in the building.
A hallway. I'll take a hallway. I don't really want to be on an
coat, one of those fancy coat closets where you check your coat, with
it'll be like 7 minutes in heaven. It'll be great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've got some time to figure that out. You can find. That's what they tell me, or at least I tell them.
Yeah.
You can find this podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We do this live throughout the off season. Subscribe to the Good Guys Talk Back YouTube channel. It really means a lot, passing it along to other Sox fans in your life. We're on Twitter X at Good Guys TV. We've got a Facebook fan page. So here is your quote of the week. It does come from new White Sox manager Will Venable. The most important thing is building a culture and creating an environment that gives these guys the best chance to go out there and win. So I do think it's going to be the same type of stuff, Pat, that chemistry, that culture, that identity. We've got to rebrand. We've got to find out who we are and buy into that. And so I think you're going to hear a lot of that moving forward.
Well, that's great. It sounds great, and it is great. But really, whether you're working for a company or you're managing a baseball team, your culture is defined by your people. You can say, and you can put it on a piece of paper or on a slide, this is who we are as an organization. This is who we are as a company. But ultimately, your people, and in this case, your players, will define what your culture is. So hopefully he's able to lead these guys in a place where his players define a good culture for this organization.
Well said. And we will see. Thank you so much for joining us. For Pat Hester, I am Nick Murawski. Until next time, go Sox.